Do you ever wonder why relationships feel so complicated, even though they're such an essential part of our lives? Well, I personally struggled with relationships for so many years until I finally discovered some really important keys that transformed my love life. And now I've been happily partnered for nearly 5 years and married for almost 2. And so in this video, I want to share with you some of the best lessons that I've learned along the way, simple, practical insights that will hopefully change how you approach relationships from now on as well. So let's dive in. The first lesson is one that was a little difficult to accept for me, to be honest, even though looking back now, it's so clear. And that is that we all project our childhood and attachment trauma onto our partners. Most relationship conflicts, they aren't about the present moment. They're about survival patterns that we learned as kids. And if your needs weren't met in childhood, you will subconsciously choose partners that reinforce those wounds. And that's what I did for years and years and years and years, until I found my now partner and wife. And I was able to realize that I was just caught in a repetition loop. And we were finally able to work on our attachment traumas together. And that made all the difference. So healing your past is not optional in relationships. And otherwise, if you don't do it, it's just gonna keep showing up in other relationships with other partners. And so I can only highly recommend that you go to therapy. I had really good experiences with somatic trauma psychotherapists that were trained in NARM and somatic experiencing. And in my own personal process, I had to learn that my partner is not my parent. We really need to stop expecting our partners to fill the gaps that our childhoods left. And if we can actually do the work where we take our projections away from our partners, magic literally can happen. The second lesson I learned was a huge aha moment when it finally sunk in. And that is that when a relationship is actually healthy, it actually flows, right? Because looking back, so many of my relationships, they felt so hard and difficult and complicated, and just from the get-go often it was a lot of ups and downs. But through my now partner, I was finally able to understand that love can feel easy. It doesn't have to be hard. Love isn't meant to feel like a constant fight for attention or respect or security. You know, a lot of my relationships in the past, they were so draining. And I can now say that they were actually rooted in dysregulation and trauma, and not passion, which is what I assumed that they were, right? True, secure, healthy relationships, they are not chaotic. They feel calm, they feel steady, they feel easy. And so if you notice yourself having to fight for love and having to fight for a relationship, maybe it's not actually love. And that was something that was huge for me, because things between me and my partner, they were just so easy from the get-go when we met. And that was just unheard of for me, really. And yeah, knowing that love can be easy, gosh, yeah, it doesn't have to be hard. Now, another thing I learned was that it's not about falling in love, it's about rising in love. You know, so many of us, we have this Hollywood version of love in our heads. And, you know, we think of instant chemistry and intense emotions and super high highs and low lows. But really, it's often just nervous system dysregulation. And it's almost like when we fall in love, it's like intoxicating, right? But oftentimes it's also unstable and just often really rooted in unresolved trauma. Whereas rising in love, it's a slow process, it's intentional, it's built on emotional safety and mutual growth. When I met Christine, it literally felt like a rising in love. And it didn't feel like I was losing myself in it. I felt like I was finding myself by being with someone. It was a whole new experience. Now, this next lesson is one that I didn't want to hear for the longest time, and maybe you don't either, but love is not all we need. Love is not enough. Love alone doesn't fix toxic patterns and unmet needs or emotional immaturity, right? A thriving relationship requires respect, it requires effort, and it requires shared values and a lot of emotional intelligence, actually. And so it's hugely important to make sure that you share similar values, that you have a similar vision, that you are actually compatible. Those are things that are way more important than just chemistry, right? Passion might be fun in the short term, and yeah, it works for a few months, but long term, love is about alignment. And so with my partner, it turns out that we had so many things in common, and we had the same outlook on life. We had the same idea of how we wanted to live life on a daily basis. We had similar dreams, and it all just aligned pretty perfectly. And those things that didn't align, they weren't massive in the grand scheme of things. Whereas beforehand in other relationships, unbelievable, the things that I just accepted and went with just to stay connected to the person, but so many times we actually weren't aligned in so many ways. And so at the end of the day, love, of course it's important, right? But it's not the biggest part of the equation. It's not the whole thing. The next lesson that I learned was, something that I definitely messed up a lot in the past, but that is that don't try to change your partner. If you're dating someone's potential, you're not actually dating them. I used to date a lot of people with a lot of potential, and I thought, just by being with me, they're gonna change, right? And I'm gonna just form them into the partner that I want them to become. I'm gonna help them heal. I'm gonna just help them become the person that I need to be with to make this relationship work. But people only change when they choose to, not because you want them to. And so in my relationship today, I learned that it's really about accepting them who they are and loving them for who they are, rather than always wanting them to be different. Which also brings me to my next point, and that is all about respecting each other's needs. And they are gonna be different, and that's okay. I used to always think that my needs need to be the same as my partner's needs, and they need to share my needs. And that's just not true, and that's just not reality. Your partner's needs, they won't always match yours, and that's perfectly normal. It's about learning to meet in the middle, and that is what makes a relationship truly work. I would often take things so personally when my partner had different needs than me, or when we didn't match. And now I know that it's important to learn to stop taking these differences personally and to actually start working with them, and to stay in your own need and what you need, but at the same time respect your partner's needs, and that they don't have anything to do with me, and that we can actually find a middle ground and make things work. Another lesson I learned was that it's so important to learn to regulate your emotions. It took me a very long time to realize that it wasn't cool to let out my unfiltered anger and to just lash out at my partner, to use my relationship as basically my emotional dumping ground. And when conflicts came up, I just used to be so triggered so quickly, and I didn't really know about the gap between trigger and response. And it's really difficult to get through arguments and conflicts in a healthy way when we're so dysregulated and when we're just reacting constantly and we're blaming and projecting. And when we don't know how to self-regulate, we're going to make our partner responsible for how we feel, which is what I did. You're responsible that I feel sad. You're responsible because I'm angry. And that is just not a way to create healthy relationships and to create a healthy, fertile ground for healthy communication. And so truly learning how to process your emotions, how to especially also deal with anger without just dumping it onto your partner is a huge, huge skill that I believe so many of us really need to learn, because we didn't learn that growing up in our families, or maybe we just saw a lot of emotional dysregulation growing up as well. And so this also brings me to my next point, and that is that being in a healthy relationship is a skill. It's not a given. And most of us, we weren't born with it, and no one ever taught us how to love well, how to communicate, how to set boundaries, how to express anger in a healthy way, right? If you didn't see healthy love growing up, you don't know how it works, right? And how to actually be in a healthy relationship. And it means that most of us, just like me, we need to learn how it works. We need to acquire these skills, and it's something that we can acquire. And it's something that I had to work really hard on to now be at a point in my relationship where I can say, wow, it's healthy. We barely have any conflicts. And when we do, we move through them fairly graciously. And what helped me was, number one, therapy for sure, but also just actually learning about relationships, learning about communication by reading books. There's so many amazing relationship books out there. But yes, educate yourself on how to be in relationship and how to actually create a healthy partnership. And this leads me to my next lesson, and that is relationships are a growth incubator. I think by now, me sharing all these lessons with you, you've realized maybe that yes, there's so much potential for beautiful growth and development in relationships. And I had to eventually realize that there's only so much healing that I can do alone on my own when I'm single. And that I actually needed to be in a partnership to do some of the really heavy healing work together with my partner. A relationship will bring up all your unhealed wound, and that's actually a good thing if you're open to them and if you're willing to actually face these wounds. And the right relationship, it's not just a love story. It's a mirror, right? And it's a catalyst for growth. And I've been growing so much these past 5 years, and I'm so grateful that I was able to open up to this world of attachment healing and trauma healing, and being able to fully dive in and experiencing the healing that can come out of it. And this is very much related to my next lesson, and that is that you need to grow and evolve together. You can't just do all the work alone. I highly recommend that you find someone who's willing to grow and evolve together, who's willing to do the inner work together alongside you, right? Because especially also if you're the one that's very much into, trauma healing, personal development, personal growth, and your partner isn't, eventually you're probably gonna grow apart. And I see this with a lot of couples out there and some friends of ours, is that when there's one part that's so ready to do the work, but the other part just doesn't want to, do the work together. And that eventually, and I see this so much out there, eventually, as much as that person wants to hold on, if your partner doesn't join you on the road to trauma healing and integrating, our wounds, then eventually it's probably not going to work, because you cannot keep pulling your partner. You cannot make them grow and evolve and develop. Your partner is going to have to want to do that with you together. And I'm super, super grateful that I found a partner that was ready from the start to work on all of our issues together, to grow together and to heal together. Now, this also brings me to my next point, which is something that a lot of couples wait way too long to actually do, and that is couples therapy. Now, me and my now wife, we started going to couples therapy after our honeymoon phase ended. So I think we went to our first couples therapy session maybe after 3 months or maybe 4 months, because we realized, oh wow, there's some issues that are kind of difficult for us to handle. And we also realized, should we just keep trying to just do this on our own, or should we just get support? Should we just get help from a professional? And that was one of the absolute best decisions we ever made, was to go to couples therapy early on, and not just when you're in a big full-blown relationship crisis and you're about to break up, right? We were never at that point, at that stage, but it was just clear because she had done a lot of therapy. I had already done a lot of therapy, so we might as well just go to therapy together, right? And I feel like so many couples, they wait until they're almost breaking up or breaking down, right, to get help. But why? Just go and get help, get support. Therapy also isn't just to fix big, huge problems in your relationship. It's really a lot about learning how to love better before these big problems arise. And so it took us maybe 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, and then we were like, oh, awesome. Now, this is beautiful. We learned so much through these few sessions. And yeah, if I can just give one tip to any couple out there, go to couples therapy. It'll just save you so much pain and conflict, and make things so much easier. Now, this next lesson is one that my wife actually inspired, because the other day I asked her, hey, I'm making this video on my biggest learnings in relationships, and what was your biggest learning in our relationship? And she brought it up, and I was like, yes, you're so right. And so we both learned in our relationship that we can be free together. In my past relationships, I always felt like I couldn't fully be me, and there was always a part of me that I needed to give up. And my partners at the time, they felt the same way, and it felt a lot like control and possession, and felt a lot like dependency. But I realized through my partner now that true love actually supports freedom. And I really feel like in our relationship, there's so much space for us to be ourselves. I can be fully myself. I can still have my own life in a way, right? Like, of course, we have a joint life. We live together. We have a dog together. And there's so many things that we do together, and things that we've merged. And at the same time, there is this life that we have together, and there are our 2 separate lives with our separate hobbies, our separate passions, and that we can feel free in our relationship and actually build a life of freedom together and still choose each other. That it's not about losing who we are and losing parts of ourselves, but actually being able to experience freedom in relationship. And that was huge. That was massive, right? We don't have to give up anything to be with our partner. We can fully express our truest selves. And that doesn't mean neglecting our partner. That doesn't mean always having to, compromise on things. It just means that we can love freely and let the other person be, and yet come together and share love. Another learning that I had that was quite surprising, actually, is that attachment styles can change. If you followed my channel for any period of time, you probably know that I used to be usually an anxious, attached person. And it turns out that I was that when I was in insecure, unhealthy relationships. I was super anxious. However, now in this relationship, which is the first time that I actually was able to experience healthy and secure love, I actually turned a little bit avoidant. I'm not massively avoidant, but still to the point where there were some issues around that, and we did have a couples therapy session here and there because of that. And it was interesting to me to realize, wow, I used to be super anxious and now I'm avoidant. Where is that coming from? And it makes total sense though, because when I was still super anxiously attached, when I was dating and in relationships, I didn't actually, respect my own boundaries. I couldn't, because connection was so much more important than my own authentic needs and my own boundaries. And so I had to just ignore my boundaries. I didn't even know I had any, right, in relationships. And so now, being in a secure relationship, I was actually able to become aware of my boundaries, to become aware of my no, to become aware of, oh, maybe I actually need a bit more space than I thought. And that was hugely interesting, because we always think that we're just one attachment style and we're that for the rest of our lives, and that's not true. Attachment styles can change from relationship to relationship, and we can heal, and that's what happened to me. I healed my anxious attachment style. Yes, I might have leaned a little bit more towards avoidant, but I would definitely say I'm very much secure these days, right? There might be a little bit of a avoidant flavor, maybe. I'm definitely the one that needs a bit more space in our relationship, but it's not an issue anymore, and we totally respect each other's needs in that way. So it's possible to change your attachment style, it's possible to heal your attachment, and you can totally go from either avoidant or anxious to secure. But you have to do the work. My last lesson is a big one, and that is you need to teach your partner how to love you. For so many years, I thought people, and especially the people I was dating, they were mind readers. They should know how to love me. Why don't they know how to love me? But, eventually I had to find out, I actually have to let my partner know how to love me. And first of all, I need to actually truly find out what it is that I actually need, and then be able to put that into words and then express these needs to my partner. And instead of expecting them to just know, it's so important to communicate what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel loved, what makes you feel valued. And it's so beautiful to express that and then have a partner that's willing to actually provide that. And at the same time, it was beautiful for me to learn what makes my partner feel safe, loved, and valued, and be able to provide that for her and see how it lights her up. And it's a continuous process. We still keep learning about these things all these years into our relationship. So if you don't teach them, do not resent them for not knowing. You gotta first find out what it actually is that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel loved, and then communicate that in a way that is not confronting, that's not blaming, but that's just loving and coming from a place of, hey, look, this is who I am, and this is how we can make this relationship work even better. And what is it that you need? How do you feel loved? How do you feel safe, right? So that's a big one. Well, so this is it. And if I had known all these things years ago, I would have saved myself a lot of heartbreak. And if you just take one thing away from this video, let it be this: love is built, it's not found. The best relationships are the ones that we consciously create every single day. And if you're ready to start doing the real inner work to create a healthy relationship, then watch this video next with this. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you soon. Peace.